Well, you've stated something that I found really interesting, and not too long ago, it was about 3 years ago, I watched a debate between Bill Nye the Science Guy and Ken Ham regarding evolution versus creation.
Hmm.
And Bill Nye sort of alluded to the fact that humanity at its inception was really stupid. And that's something that we've all been indoctrinated to believe. And then Ken Ham made a statement like, well, why do you think that? If people were able to build an ark, clearly there was a great amount of intelligence. And that always stuck with me.
I would just say Noah was unskilled. I mean, I didn't meet Noah, and neither did you. And, really, it's an evolutionary view of origins, I believe, because you're thinking in terms people before us aren't as good as us. Hey, there are civilizations that existed in the past, and we look at their technology, and we can't even understand today how they did some of the things that they did. Who says Noah couldn't build a big boat? By the way, the Chinese and the Egyptians built boats. In fact, some of our research indicates that some of the wooden boats that were built had 3 layers interlocking so they wouldn't twist like that and leak.
And ever since then, I've no longer subscribed to that. So my question is, do you believe that the technology that existed in the antediluvian era, I mean, I'm not assuming that they had Wi-Fi or anything like that, but do you believe what kinds of technologies do you think existed? Because I've never heard anyone allude to what it might have been. They've just sort of said there was technology, but what kind of technology?
I would I would I would assume that some of the technologies that they had in the antediluvian world were very much analogous to the kind of technology that we use today as it pertains to vehicles of conveyance, weapons of war, and so forth. However, their technologies of communication, such as the technology we're using right now, cell phones, laptops, and so forth, I very highly doubt that those forms of technology were being used in the antediluvian world. But certainly technologies of conveyance, certainly technologies of warfare. Now, how advanced were these technologies? We can only speculate. One of the problems that we encounter, and anyone encounters, when trying to look for the remains of antediluvian technology, what we might consider as high technologies, we don't really know what we're looking for. We use a very mechanistic form of technology today. Our technology is based on Newton's laws of physics and quantum mechanics and so forth. Our technology of our vehicles of conveyance, the ones that we use, not the ones that the deep military projects use, but the ones that we use, are based on internal combustion. We make things explode in order to create motion, in order to create inertia, motion. That's not necessarily the kind of technology that would have been employed in the antediluvian world by these advanced beings. In fact, I think that the technology that they were using, the sons of God, the Watchers, as they're called in the extra biblical text, was a technology that would be more akin to what we call today UFOs. These advanced aerial craft that are using some kind of a propulsionary system that is totally different than internal combustion. They're not using jet fuel, in other words. There's some other kind of mechanisms. There are laws of physics that we have yet to uncover that obviously whoever is operating this craft in the atmosphere over planet Earth is using a form of energy that has yet to be discovered by the human race, or has been discovered but is simply not available to the general populace. That would be the kind of technology I would expect to find in the antediluvian world. Why? Because, as I said, the sons of God, the B'nai Elohim that descended to the earth, these were not just spiritual beings. These are not purely metaphysical entities. These are beings that are coming from a very advanced civilization. And that's the way I think that people need to retool the way that they think about the biblical narrative. When we talk about angels, when we talk about the sons of God, when we talk about the Watchers, we're talking about citizens of a very advanced civilization, and in my opinion, an exceedingly old civilization, predating ours. In fact, the implements of human civilization come from their civilization. In other words, we are the beneficiaries of them. We benefit from their civilization.
Mhm.
Our technology, our system of governance, it's all modeled on something else. We didn't invent civilization, we inherited it. And I think this is clear. These are certainly assumptions, but I think they're logical assumptions on my part. I think that we are entitled to make these kind of logical inferences based on the narrative that we have in front of us, both in the biblical text, the extra biblical text, and again in the collective narrative of the human race going back centuries. So I probably veered really far away from the question that you asked me. I don't even remember what it was.
I asked about technology, which you answered. Like, what kind of technology did they have? And you absolutely did answer that.
Very advanced technology in most cases. Now let me add an addendum to your question there that I think is important.
Go.
It does not necessarily mean, by the way, that the Watchers were allowing the human race to use the same kind of technology that they were using. When the Watchers arrived to planet Earth, they're coming from an advanced civilization. They didn't have to develop the technology on Earth. They already had it. Some people might even ask, how did they get here? Did they just come through a portal? These are very general terms. We don't really know what the heck a portal is. A wormhole, a black hole. We really don't know what these things are. These are theoretical abstractions. We can guess. We can say that some kind of a portal was opened up between dimensions and they pop through. That may be the case, but there's an easier answer. Maybe they came here in vehicles of conveyance. In other words, maybe they arrived in what we might consider as UFOs. So they probably arrived with this technology, and there's no indication that they would have given it to us. Now, according to the Book of Enoch, they taught it to their offspring. They did. And the human race was led astray because of this illicit knowledge that the Watchers gave to mankind. And part of that knowledge was the ability to make weapons of war in order to do battle with one another. But the Watchers established an empire on the earth.
Yes.
And that's the key to understanding the antediluvian world. This was not a random occurrence. This was the construction of an empire on planet Earth, a global empire. This is part of the reason. This was part of the enticement of these Watchers descending in the first place. They know, by the way, according to the extra biblical account, they know that when they do this thing, when they rebel, when they act in this insubordinate way against God, against the king, that there is going to be repercussion, that there is going to be a ramification, that judgment will come at some point. They know this because they bind themselves by mutual implications. In other words, they take an oath and they say, if one of us pays the price, we all pay the price for what we're about to do.
That's a very stupid thing to do for 200.
Well, yes, it is. There was 200 of them, but something was enticing them. Something very powerful was enticing them. Now, I like to extrapolate this because what could make it worth it for them to do what they were about to do, knowing that it would incur judgment, knowing that they're coming from this advanced civilization, knowing that when they descend to the earth and they commit this transgression against the King of Heaven, that the armies of heaven, that the King himself is going to be very angry with them and that judgment will ensue. So there was a very strong temptation to do what they did. It wasn't an afterthought. And in my opinion, obviously, the Bible intimates that there's a component of lust involved. They lusted after human women. Remember, according to the scriptures, the elder race, our angelic counterparts do not have females. They don't have females. You guys are very unique in the cosmos. The female component of the human race is very unique in the cosmos. The angelic race doesn't have a female component. And so when Adam was given a female component, when he was given a helpmate, as some versions of the Bible have it, this would have sparked jealousy in the elder race. This is a special gift that was granted to the human race, to Adam, to mankind on planet Earth. And it's often overlooked. The idea of having a female counterpart is tempting for several reasons to a race that doesn't. The first component is, if we're like them, we look like them, and anatomically speaking, we're very much like them, then there would be the component of lust. And there was. They lusted after human women. That's the first component. But the second component is that because mankind has a female counterpart, we can procreate, at least in a way that is very different. If there's procreation elsewhere in the universe, I don't know. But on Earth, it was a very specific procreation. It was between a man and a woman. So we had the ability to procreate and to make offspring for ourselves, to populate the earth with our offspring. This was absolutely a temptation to the Watchers. So it's not just a question of lust. The fall of the Watchers is just as much about the desire to procreate as it was about the desire to have a wife, to have a female counterpart. And then there's a third element that's probably the most overlooked. And that third element has to do with dominion. By the way, everything I'm saying here is spelled out in my upcoming book.
Lovely. Which you'll send to me.
Coming out sometime. I've been writing it, and it's going to come out soon. I don't know when. I've been working on it. All of these elements are spelled out in my book. And people can go to my website for information about that.
I have this one.
Yeah, that's True Legends by Steve Quayle. That's an excellent book, and I definitely recommend it for people who want to continue to
fall down the rabbit hole.
to unpack this kind of information. But this third component, before I forget, that is essential to understanding the descent, the fall of the Watchers, is dominion of the earth. The earth is a realm. The earth is a realm, and you and I were made to be regents of this realm. And so the human race, Adam, was a regent of this realm. And so by way of procreation, the Watchers could create a being that was human enough to also exert the authority, to claim the authority that Adam had in the earth. That seems like an esoteric point, seems like a very esoteric theme, but I spell it out in my book, and I think that it's undeniable once you plug in the component of dominion. I'm not talking about dominionism, by the way. I do not subscribe to dominionism, to the theology of dominionism that is very popular in certain charismatic circles. I am definitely against the idea of dominionism. Do not mistake dominionism with the reality of dominion,
of having
regency.
Dominion. Yeah.
So I just decided to stop talking.
I can't wait to get your book. No, that's okay. I can't wait to get your book. That's fabulous. I wanted to. You said a couple of different things, and I'm just trying to remember everything. But one of them was, do you believe? Well, not do you believe? Why do you think it is that the production of a human and an angel always results in red hair, pale skin? Because the giant in Afghanistan had red hair. The giants in the Solomon Islands, I think they said, have red hair. I've never heard of an African American or a black or a tanned looking giant.
I'm going to say two things about that. First, I don't think it always does result in red hair. I think I think when you talk about red hair, you're talking about a post-flood giant. And the reason why I think many of the giants allegedly have red hair is because of the Phoenicians.
The Phoenicians?
Of the Phoenicians.
What does that mean?
The Phoenicians were responsible for the diffusion of the genetics Rephaim, the Nephilim, the Canaanitish tribes that inhabited the land of Canaan. When I say Canaanitish, I'm just referencing those tribes. There were many tribes that inhabited the land of Canaan.
Yes.
Some of them were tribes of giants.
Oh, sure.
Some
yes.
of them
I'm aware
were
of that,
tribes of regular-sized human beings who had this race of giants intermingled into their populace.
Mhm.
You know, the Philistines with Goliath, for example.
Goliath. Yeah.
Goliath was a giant intermingled into the populace of the Philistines. But some of those tribes were probably almost all giants, such as the Nephilim. We know that the Anakim were giants as well. There's a lot of them. There's at least half a dozen tribes that are definitely coming from the lineage of the Watchers in a post-flood context. But all of these Canaanitish tribes, all of the Canaanites after the conquest of Canaan by Joshua. Remember, Joshua did not destroy all of the tribes like he was supposed to. The Hebrews were supposed to eradicate these tribes because they were eradicating the seed, the offspring of the Watchers that were still in the earth in a post-flood context. So the Canaanites consolidated in Sidon and Tyre, which eventually became the empire, the kingdom of the Phoenicians, and other places as well. And the Phoenicians were, of course, the greatest seafarers, were also the greatest masons on earth. In fact, the Masonic order, the order of Freemasonry, is believed to have its roots in Solomon. That's only partly true. It has its roots in the Phoenicians just as much as it has its roots in Solomon, because who built Solomon's temple? The Phoenicians built it. Why did Solomon employ them? Because they were the greatest masons. And they had, to a degree, they were able to build megalithic constructions, but not to the same degree as their predecessors in the antediluvian world. They had the remnants of the knowledge to build megaliths, and we can see that it's on a grand display on the island of Sardinia, where there were over 30,000 megalithic towers, rough-hewn megalithic towers, on the island of Sardinia that were constructed in the Cyclopean style. And the Cyclopean style is the megalithic style. It's large blocks of stone, either hewn or rough cut, that are held together, that are placed together without the use of mortar. They're assembled without mortar in a very particular style. This was called Cyclopean architecture, the Cyclopean style, by the Greeks, who attributed such constructions to the offspring of the gods, the Cyclopes. And so the island of Sardinia is very interesting. I have no doubt, none, that it was inhabited by Canaanites, probably after the conquest of the land of Canaan by Joshua.
That's in your
that
part
there were
3,
giants among those inhabitants on the island of Sardinia, and that they had the knowledge of megalith building. Obviously, they built these rough-hewn towers, these nuraghi, as they're called. And the nuraghi are built of rough-hewn stones, so the stones are very rough cut. However, at the top of the nuraghi, you have these, and most of these towers are made of basalt, volcanic rock, very hard. At the top of these towers, you have a platform of wood. It's gone now because it's rotted away over time, but there used to be a platform of wood at the top, and supporting that platform were very finely cut stones, basalt, volcanic basalt stones, which were supporting it, buttresses. So whoever built those towers, over 30,000 of them, not all of them very large, but some of them over 100 feet, could assemble these rough-hewn stones in the Cyclopean style without mortar, and had the knowledge to cut those stones very finely. And there's only one race on earth that could do that, one people, that was the Phoenicians.
Interesting. I also wanted to ask you regarding just the fact that obviously Jesus comes on earth to die on the cross for the sins of humanity. So those humans who have been corrupted by the giants, or the giants themselves, because they have human blood and they come from angels, does Jesus or God have any kind of empathy or love for them? I know it's a stupid question, but it's something that's
It's
made me
not a stupid
curious.
question. It's a very good question. It's a very important question, actually.
Oh.
Listen, in the Christian faith, something that escapes people, especially those who look from the outside in, is the fact that there's only one thing that qualifies us for salvation in the cross of Christ. There's only one qualifier. You must be human. Jesus is a kinsman redeemer. What's that mean? That means that Jesus became like us in every way. He became human to redeem us. So the redemption, what Jesus did on the cross, the gospel of Jesus Christ, pertains to the human race. And what's happening there is a restoration of the human race to what it was supposed to be in the beginning, what Adam was created to be. Jesus is the second Adam, or the last Adam. He resets the blueprint. And so salvation in the cross, by definition of the gospel, is exclusive to us, the human race. He became like us to save us. He didn't become like the angels to save the angels. He didn't become like the hybrids or the Nephilim to save them. He came to save us. So that's why the gospel pertains to the restoration of the human race, and not the human race in general. I'm not here preaching universalism. This isn't a universal salvation. It's a salvation for those who put their trust and their faith in Jesus, that he was the Son of God, and the death, burial, resurrection, and ascension of Jesus Christ. Fundamentals of the gospel. So salvation, what qualifies you to receive the gospel is that you're human. But being human doesn't mean that you have received the gospel, that you've received the gift of God. You have to have faith in Jesus. You have to have faith in the gospel. You have to believe that he was the Son of God, and again, believe the fundamentals of the gospel, the death, burial, resurrection, and ascension of Jesus Christ. And so when I say qualify, understand that what I'm saying is the cross, the work of the cross only pertains to the human race as it relates to redemption.
Understood. There's a huge assumption out there, from what I've noticed, that all the giants are evil. I'm echoing. Why is that? Why are they all automatically evil? Like, aren't some of them friendly with the humans? Aren't some of them, don't some of them want to raise their kids, like, have the same concerns as a normal human family?
Well, let's be careful here to define giant. There is a medical condition called giantism.
No, that's not what I meant.
And I don't want people to confuse giantism with the biblical understanding of a giant.
The Rephaim.
People with giantism are suffering from something that is deleterious to their health.
Yes.
They die early, but sometimes they reach extraordinary heights, even close to 9 feet tall in some cases. But they're fully human.
Yes.
However, there is the spawn of the Watchers and human women. Those giants were not fully human, and they were created through this illicit act, this prohibited act that was, for lack of a better term, against the law. They were not allowed to do that. They came and they did it anyway. It was an act of insubordination. And so because of this act of insubordination, what follows is an insubordinate race of entities that are in defiance of heaven. They are loyal to their fathers, and they are in defiance of the King of Heaven. They are in a state of insubordination. I have never encountered a story in the biblical or extra-biblical text in which giants are good. There are some, not many, by the way, very, very few myths that I've encountered in antiquity that depict giants as being good. the vast majority, the overwhelming majority of stories concerning giants depicts them as malevolent, as evil. The overwhelming majority also depicts them as cannibals.
Yes, yeah.
And as oppressors of mankind. And so the only stories that I can actually even cite that depict giants as good guys are fairy tales. Don't even have their roots in the mythologies of antiquity. There are some examples you might be able to cite from Greek mythology and so forth, but for the most part, the giant offspring of the gods were feared. Think about the Cyclops, for example, in Homer's Odyssey and so forth. The giants that Homer encounters in the Odyssey, all of them are evil. The giants of Laestrygonia, for example, the island of giants, which is probably referring to Sardinia. These are cannibals. These are man-eating cannibals. So, Polyphemus, the Cyclops that Odysseus encounters, probably on the island of Sicily. Also carnivorous, I should say, cannibalistic and evil. So the general depiction of giants in antiquity is one of malevolence.
Yeah, that's why I asked, because I thought, well, don't they have normal concerns as well for their babies? Yeah.